for Brian Walsche then. Let's talk about it. Wow, what a power panel we have this morning for this case. Let's bring them in now. I want to welcome back to the show nationally known radio host and the creator and host of the show Road Patrol Live, John DePietro. Private investigator, former Army intelligence officer and NYPD officer Manuel Gomez. And celebrity attorney, he does criminal defense work and civil work, attorney John Phillips. Good morning to you all. Can we start with just the story of this, please? John DePietro, can't think of a better storyteller than you. You know, you've done this for many, many years, covered many criminal cases. You're in this area. What has this case done to the community? Would you speak to the impact of Anna Walsche's disappearance and the sentiment for justice for Anna, please?
Julie, this was just so horrifying. You know, I was outside the house in Cohasset when they actually arrested Brian Walsche. But this was a situation, this guy, he had some charges pending against him that he had committed art fraud, that he had sold someone paintings that weren't legitimate. Anna Walsche was this enchanting, lovely young mother. She accepted and took a very high-profile real estate job in Washington, D.C. And so for a while, the arrangement was she would fly back and forth. And Cohasset is a beautiful area right on the South Shore. And then she finally came to a kind of a fork in the road. And I've spoken with some of her friends in D.C. who loved her. And she was beautiful and talented. And her plan was she was going to move her 3 young boys down with her to live in D.C. I spoke with the people that helped her decorate her townhouse in their rooms. But instead, when she mentioned that to Brian Walsche, he went off, and on New Year's night, as you've talked about, he took her life. It absolutely rocketed around the community. People were mortified. And now the gall of this guy to be in court trying to say it had something to do with Proctor. Julie, there's no way the judge is going to allow this.
John, I think you're absolutely right. And thank you for all of that context. You know, we see the pictures and we get just a few facts. You know, beautiful woman, successful in her career, a mother of 3 kids. And then when you hear just how devastating it was, it sickens you even more. And investigators knew that this guy lied. Manuel Gomez, this is where I want to go to you. So even though they haven't found her body yet, or any remnants of her body, because investigators believe, as you know, Manuel, that she was dismembered by him. That's what they believe happened. He lied about where she was, her transportation, where he was, the searches on his son's tablet, of all things, searching for dead bodies, smelling how to dispose of a dead body, all of it. Would you please speak to how you build an investigation like this one, Manuel, and if you think they've got Brian Walsche, regardless if they can ever bring Anna home?
Well, I like to say I think they got a rock-solid case against him, that even if they have Officer Proctor come up biased or whatever, he's not going to win. Like you said, Julie, he researched on how to dispose of human remains. He also researched on the cleaning products. The cleaning products that he bought, some of those cleaning products actually destroyed DNA evidence. And on top of that, he methodically put these garbage bags in trash bins, Julie, so that he knew that they were going to be taken away and incinerated. There's no doubt in my mind. And the fact that the places that they went to incinerate are between 1,500 and 2,000 degrees, destroyed any possibility of getting DNA evidence. But I got to commend the prosecutor in this case, because now that they found a piece of bone, they're able to slice that bone and get into the bone marrow, which is the bone marrow is the soft tissue in that bone. And I think this is going to be one of the defining moments in this case. And this DNA evidence is going to be a slam dunk.
Wow, that gave me chills, Manuel, as you were saying that. Thank you for that insight. John Phillips, last but certainly not least, let's talk about legally what's going on with this guy, the criminal case he's got. Tremendous hot water this man is in, as you know. Could he also have civil liability as well? Tell us what you think. Assess Brian Walsche's legal difficulties, if you would, please, John.
You know, one of the most often cases that I bring, one of the cases I bring most often is a wrongful death case following a criminal investigation. And you don't often see it in spouse versus spouse that were currently married, that were murdered, because there's insurance exclusions and exemptions, and then there's issues with how you can essentially recover. But if there's a murder, if there's a wrongful death, certainly it's an avenue you can pursue. I do want to dovetail on that last point about this DNA. That's going to be a big issue in the case. And my understanding is it's such a small amount of DNA that they're worried about destructive testing. And we've had that in other cases where, you have such a small sample that you're worried about the defense getting be able to test in future. Like the wrongful death attorneys get to test that too, because, when you only have one bite at the apple, sometimes that's bad for the rest.
Oh, that's a really interesting point, John. So there could be some interest expressed from civil lawyers at this point, trying to say, wait a minute, let's make sure we're protected ahead in the months to come.
We've got that going on in the YNW Melly murder case, where the state did a download of some of the vehicle data. You get this black box data, and then also there's a lot of data if you plug your phone into the system that syncs and GPS and information. But sometimes that data can only be downloaded once. And you want to make sure, whether you're the state or you're the civil side looking at it, that the entity that's downloading it does a good job and tries to preserve as much for kind of future investigations as possible.
Thank you so much for that, John. So this is really an important point. So we know Brian Walsche is kind of making this Hail Mary play with, Proctor was biased and said nasty things about Karen Reed, so I guess I must have some difficulty. But let's talk about the other things even more difficult. John DePietro, let me go back to you, please. Some of these facts. Using his child's iPad, some of the most disgusting evidence comes from that. Would you speak to that part of the story, please?
Yeah, that's amazing, Julie. And this is one of those situations where Brian Walsche, he thought he was going to be slick, but that was the first time when you think about Google searches, and this was in the early morning hours of New Year's. They had a dinner guest who left, and then prosecutors, police believe that's when Brian Walsche committed this heinous act towards his wife. But he used his child's iPad, and as you've kind of touched on, to look at, how long before a body starts to decompose, how long before it smells, and how to get rid of something like that. He also ended up coming up with using a dumpster, and that's where, in fact, they have him riding to some of the dumpsters kind of near that area. But Julie, I want to touch on, and this is so important with the Proctor angle, so much has been made about Trooper Michael Proctor, but in the end, and this is so important, now Josh Levy, who did the investigation into Sandra Birchmore, that's how they got the Proctor text. He's leaving office. There was never a charge brought for conspiracy. So for all of the noise about Proctor, they never found text where he was rigging or tainting any of the evidence in the Karen Reed case. So therefore, why I say that is, I think the judge is going to reject this outright. But make no mistake about it, Julie, Brian Walsche, the police, they have a solid case, whether it's the son's iPad, whether it was his movement, whether, kind of the plan that was set in motion, what he did after that. Although they don't have the body, they seemingly have a lot more than just that.
Oh, you're exactly right. And thank you for that context, too, about Michael Proctor. And for anybody at home who may not recognize that name, Joshua Levy, who you mentioned, was the sitting U.S. attorney in the district where Karen Reed's case was taking place. And John, please correct me if I'm wrong, but a lot of people may not realize it was Karen Reed's defense team who provided Joshua Levy's office with only certain documents pertaining to the case and said, there's a cover-up, launch an investigation, please, there's a conspiracy. And that is how Joshua Levy's office was able to subpoena Proctor's phone records. Is that accurate, John?
That's exactly right. It really started with the Sandra Birchmore case, and they were right. And as a result of that, they thought, let's take another look at this. In the end, no one was charged. And the reason why that's so important is because that's what the judge is going to rule on.
Yeah, no, this is really important. We're not done talking about Karen Reed's case. In fact, more of it's coming up next. I'm so glad you three are on the program. Coming up next, I'm so glad you three are on the program.